Hi everyone, thanks for watching my video. This is going to be a video about using ESLint in a React app, but this follows on from some videos that I recorded the other day about building a really basic Hello World type React app. I touched on ES6 in I think the first video that I recorded. I was talking about the difference between ES6 and ES5 and why you have to compile your code when you're building in React and the differences in ES6 syntax and ES6 JavaScript. One thing that I forgot to mention is this concept of arrow functions in ES6. So you can see just this function here that I wrote the other day. It's an ES5 function, so it uses the function keyword and then the name of the function and the arguments that it takes, etc. An arrow function is a concept that was introduced in ES6 JavaScript, and it's basically using this little arrow symbol here for an anonymous function. So if you look at this function here, this is exactly the same function, just rewritten as an arrow function. Normally arrow functions are anonymous functions, so if you want you can save them into a variable so you can reuse them again. So in this case, rather than using a var, I've just used a const, which is for a constant, which means it can't be reassigned, and called it format name, which was the name that I'd given the function originally. And then you just say equals, and then you put the parentheses to indicate that it's a function with the argument or arguments inside it as well. And then this little arrow symbol to indicate that you're or to indicate what the function is going to return. So I just wanted to quickly explain arrow functions a bit, just because it was a concept that really confused me when I first came across them. So that's all it is. It's just a way of writing anonymous functions in ES6 syntax. Okay, so I wanted to talk about ESLint. So ESLint is a linting tool, which means that you can use it to basically run through and scan all of your code and make sure that you're not running into any bugs in your code, and also you can use ESLint to enforce a set of rules on the way that you write your code. So when you install ESLint, you just npm install it. If you look on the ESLint website, then you can find out how to do that. When you install ESLint, you get this thing called a .eslintrc file. And this is just basically the config file for ESLint. It's a JavaScript object, and it has this section here called rules, which is a dictionary. And rules is exactly what it sounds like. It's the rules that you want ESLint to enforce on your code to make sure that your code adheres to these rules. So it can be things like, say, blocked scope var, which makes sure that any variables that you use are scoped to the block of the code that they're inside and aren't used outside that block. Callback return, which enforces return statements when you're using a callback inside a function. And even just stylistic things, like for example, indent. So I prefer using tabs over spaces, so this just enforces tabs rather than spaces in my code. And also quotes, so any strings that you use in your code, this is enforcing using double quotation marks rather than single quotes for the strings. So ESLint will scan my files when I call it via terminal command, and it will just make sure that all of my code adheres to the rules that I've set up. Okay, so I had my React test file the other day. This was a JavaScript file originally, but I had to change it to a JSX file because ESLint was having trouble reading the JSX syntax inside the JavaScript file. So if you change your file to a JSX file, you have to do that if you're using any JSX syntax for React in the file, and then ESLint can read that. And the way that I'm using ESLint is through Gulp. So I used Gulp the other day to call on Webpack and Babel to compile my code. But Gulp is a build tool, so you can use it to kind of call on anything. And the good thing about Gulp is that you can also chain commands. So here you can see the function that I wrote to use Gulp to call Webpack, which will compile my code. But there's also another one here which is using Gulp just to run ESLint. So it's looking for any files in this client folder, which is where all my JavaScript files that I've written are. And it's not looking at any node modules because you don't want it to scan any of the npm modules that you've installed. And then it'll run through just the files that you've specified, any JS or JSX files in my case, and look for any errors. And then you can chain Gulp commands just as you can see at the bottom here. So I've made this other Gulp task called build, and then inside an array you just put any of the other names of the Gulp tasks that you want it to run when you call on this command. So lint here and webpack from here. And what this means is that Gulp will, when you call on Gulp build, it will lint and compile your code at the same time, so it significantly reduces your kind of compile time and things. And the way that I'm using Gulp and ESLint together is just through another npm module called Gulp ESLint. It's that simple. So all we need to do here, if I just clear my terminal so it doesn't look so confusing. So if you wanted to just run a lint on your code separately, you could say Gulp lint, which is the name that I gave it. It would run through and check all my files and says it's finished linting your files after a second, and I don't have any errors because I've had a chance to go through and correct all the errors before you see them. So then I could call Gulp Webpack like I did the other day if I wanted to compile my code after this, or I can call Gulp build. So this starts lint and webpack at the same time. It tells you it's finished lint, and then it's finished webpack, and it's finished building and compiling all of your code. So that means if I go to my browser, you can see here, if it ever actually changes tabs, you can see that the Hello World React app is working. And you can change the name like we did the other day, back to my name. And then you can just Gulp build again, just to recompile all of the code, and then it will change the web page. Okay, so if you're wanting to find out more about ESLint, they have a really good website. It has rules all about configuring ESLint. It's very configurable. There are a ton of different things that you can change to customize it to how you want it. There's also a huge list of rules here that you can implement in your config file, things that you can change about, like, you know, both the way that you want the code to work and also more kind of stylistic things like about curly braces and tabs over spaces and things like that. So yeah, I hope that was useful. So thank you for watching. Bye.